Love it or hate it, social media personalities lacing up the gloves has left a massive impact in boxing and caused a surge in the sport's popularity. They bring fantasy fight culture to life, and with it, a sense that anything can happen. Of course, not many can pick up the gloves and naturally learn the basics enough to look even vaguely like a real boxer. Some have dedicated a large part of their lives to this newfound path. Others had skills from their passion that helped them transition over to boxing, while it just came naturally to others. As always, we'll be rating them by giving them stats in 5 key traits. The first is power, how often they knock down or knock out their opponents. Hand speed, the speed of their combinations and jabs. Endurance, how much punishment they can take to the head and body and keep fighting well. Gas tank, whether they can manage their energy well enough to perform well in the later rounds. And technique, footwork, head movement, downloading information, and any other tools the fighter may have in their arsenal. Finally, we use this to give them a rating out of 5 stars. We'll be rating them at a far lower scale than usual, as I don't think we'd get higher than a 2-star if we go by the standards this channel usually does. We're gonna start with a man synonymous with success as a crossover boxer, Jake the problem child Paul. He's a juggernaut of a content creator who gained fame on Vine and then expanded his presence on YouTube, where his content ranged from pranks to vlogs with a YouTube following of over 20 million subscribers. Jake's resume as a newcomer to the sport is far more star-studded than most who take on this challenge. He's boxed against 2 former UFC champions in Tyrone Woodley and Anderson Silva, as well as beloved UFC veteran Nate Diaz. His record stands at 10 wins with only 1 loss, coming from his first fight against an actual professional boxer, Tommy Fury, the younger brother to elite heavyweight boxer Tyson Fury. The fact that Jake managed a loss by split decision does give us some information that he's near the same level as Fury, who is undefeated in 10 fights as a professional. Given 2 of those 10 fights were against fighters on this list, we'd call them promising fighters for the pro game. Now, let's look at what that means for his stats. Jake has massive power for this level, 7 KO wins, and 4 of those in the first round. This is enough to get him a massive 9 out of 10. His hand speed is another part of the reason for his high KO ratio. His quick jabs and short combinations are fast enough to get him an 8. In his fight against Tommy Fury, he took a fair amount of venomous shots and didn't get too badly affected. His endurance stands at an 8 too. His gas tank holds up for 10 rounds, enough for him to keep his pace, but his power does slip slightly. He gets a 7 here. His technique is ever increasing, and he has showed substantial growth in his footwork and defense against Fury. He'll get an 8 out of 10. This brings his total to a high bar set at 4 stars. From Jake we move on to his brother Logan Paul. Logan Paul was a massive YouTuber who became even more famous, or rather infamous, in the incident in Japan's suicide forest. His ring resume is far from as extensive or successful as his younger brother, but there are a couple of big names on it. When I say a couple, I mean that quite literally, as there probably are only 2 names you'd recognize. Firstly, Logan's record stands at 4 fights with only 1 win, 2 draws and a loss. His only loss is to his business partner KSI. Their first fight was a tentative 6-round battle of jabs and ended in a draw. A year later, they had a rematch that ended up in a split decision loss for Logan. 2 years later, he'd managed to book a fight with arguably the greatest defensive boxer of all time, Floyd Mayweather. Floyd was of course far smaller, and Logan threw punches in bunches and managed to get a draw. Most recently, Logan secured his first decision win over Dylan Dennis, who seemed like he came into the fight just to survive. So let's dissect this and get a rating for our second Paul brother. Logan has been bigger than every opponent and has barely hurt anyone, so he gets a power rating of 4. His jabs connect often enough and his combinations come off sloppy when they're quick. His hand speed rates at about a 5. His endurance hasn't been tested by anyone who hits hard enough, but since he doesn't get hurt too often, we'll give him another 5. Logan's only fought 8-round and 6-round fights, so his gas tank is something else that hasn't been tested too well. The fact that he does look tired after he's fought an 8-rounder puts his gas tank at another 5. He has just enough technical ability to stand in the ring with other crossover boxers, putting his technique at a 4. This brings Logan Paul's rating to a total of 2.3 stars. Now we move back up the ladder a bit. Michelle Carre is a YouTuber with a content premise that fits perfectly with crossing over into boxing. She was a professional cyclist who turned content creator, making BuzzFeed videos, when she branched out to make her own content on accepting physical challenges to push her to her limits. One of these challenges was to train like an Olympic boxer, and her opponent would be Andrea Botez. Botez had one match prior to this and dominated Dina Belenkaya, showing tremendous natural talent and training, and Kare got in and showed her that her training would put her levels above Botez. Michelle showed that she could dart in and out of range, come in at angles, cut off the ring, move around the ring, and maintain her high pace throughout the fight. This was all against a very tough, very game Andrea Botez, who never let up and showed tremendous tenacity. So even with Kare having just one fight, it's against a worthy enough opposition to rate her. So let's do that right now. Her power was enough to keep Botez at a distance, but not to hurt her. Michelle gets a 7 for power. Her fast hands beat Andrea to the punch most of the fight. Her hand speed ranks at an 8 out of 10. Kare took a few clean jabs and didn't even flinch. I don't see any other female content creator putting her on the floor. She gets an 8 for endurance. She seemed like she could do another 5 rounds after her bout, which is no shock looking at her training. Her gas tank stands at a 9. She learned the intricacies of boxing technique bizarrely quickly and looked like a real pro. She gets a 10 out of 10 for technique. This gives Michelle Kare a grand total of 4.2 stars. Now we backtrack to an athlete we mentioned earlier in this video. KSI is a global YouTube superstar known for making content varying from gaming, reactions, sport, and so much more. As we said, he'd fought Logan Paul twice and came away with a draw and a win. He also has one opponent in common with Jake. He also fought Tommy Fury and lost by unanimous decision. The fight was extremely awkward, with a lot of clinching and KSI moving around the ring in an extremely unorthodox stance. His greatest win was a KO victory against a 40-year-old Joe Fournier who was an active boxer between 2015 and 2017. The victory was, however, overturned when footage of an illegal elbow strike from KSI was reviewed. He's also gone on to knock out content creators FaZe Temper and Swarms. He felt energized enough after beating Swarms that he fought a young, newly pro boxer Luis Pineda, who was not game enough, and KSI pulled off a second KO victory in one night. With this, we have enough to rate the other pioneer of crossover boxing. His power is enough to knock out other content creators, but seems unlikely that it would match up to other combatants. A 6 seems about right for power. His unorthodox stance sometimes allows his hands to fly faster, but not fast enough to get higher than a 7. He is a very tough fighter though. Logan was quite a bit bigger than him and couldn't finish him. He gets a 7 for endurance. His gas tank was enough to do 2 short fights in a night, so I don't think we can give him lower than an 8 for gas tank. His technique and strange style is good enough to baffle beginners, but no more than that. He gets a 6 for technique, bringing his total up to 3.4 stars. If you've made it this far in the video, you're in for a great surprise. Our final fighter first rose to fame on one of the most successful TV series of all time, Game of Thrones. He is the Mountain Hafthor Bjornsson. Aside from his terrifying character, he's placed top 3 in the World's Strongest Man contests from 2011 to 2021. His YouTube career spans from weightlifting, martial arts to eating challenges. This of course made for a great transition into a boxing career. Of all the combatants we've had here today, Hafthor may have had the most challenging start in terms of opposition. His first exhibition match was against an ex-WBO European lightweight champion Stephen Ward in 2021, which ended in a draw. In the same year, he fought his second exhibition match when he faced the 2021 Commonwealth Games heavyweight gold medalist Simon Valili, and it ended up in another draw. He then faced Canadian professional arm wrestler Devin Larratt in his first pro boxing match. Larratt was a replacement after strongman rival Eddie Hall had sustained a bicep tear during training. Bjornsson made quick work of Larratt, and the match was stopped for a TKO in the first round. He eventually got his fight with Eddie Hall in 2021, and put on a masterclass to win by unanimous decision. Hafthor showed that he had more than just strength, darting in and out of range, showing enough ring IQ to counter Hall's one-dimensional attacks, and a quick enough jab to make his opponent uncomfortable. This gives us enough for a pretty fair rating, so let's do it. We don't have to mess around talking about his power. He's the world's strongest man, he gets a 10. His jabs are quick enough to compete with seasoned boxers. He gets an 8 for hand speed. He did get dropped by Eddie Hall, but getting back up from a punch from someone that strong is saying something. His endurance stands at a 7. His movement around the ring slowed around the 6th round against Hall, but not enough to get his gas tank rating lower than a 7. His technique was definitely honed by his first 2 exhibition fights at the start of his career. He gets an 8 for technique, putting his grand total at 4 stars. Let me know in the comments who else you think belongs on this list. Also, if you're enjoying the content on this channel, please be sure to subscribe and leave a like on the videos. It helps us tremendously. Until next time.